Hey guys, so today we are going to use Laravel and build a blog application with it. So Laravel became lately very popular, so the last year and this year. And the reason for that is it comes with a lot of functions already implemented. You have almost Stripe complete implemented already in Laravel. It's very easy to make it work with modern front stacks. You have, authentication already implemented. And again, there are a lot of things, and the workflow is really convenient. It's really easy to work with actually, and it makes actually really fun to work with. So I thought it would be a good idea, instead of making a race tutorial, to make a tutorial with Laravel. So to get started, simply go to laravel.com and to documentation. Make sure to have the newest documentation which is 5.7. And then down here, the first thing you have to do is to install Composer. So simply go to Composer and install it for your machine. Once you have done this, we can use Composer inside the terminal. So simply copy this, Composer global require Laravel install, and paste it inside your terminal. And make sure it's your terminal sets up this automatically, but again, if you have some kind of problems, it's probably because your path wasn't set up in the root directory. So if everything was installed correctly, normally you can use Laravel new and then the name of the app to create a new application. So let's go to the desktop. I'm already on my desktop, so Laravel new, and let's call it blog app with Laravel. Doesn't really matter as always. So this will create a bunch of files, Command T to create a new tab, and I'm using as my database MySQL. So if you want to use MySQL as well, which I recommend, simply use Homebrew to install it. So brew install MySQL, and that's it. I'm using the version 5.7, so if you want to use 5.7 as well, simply add an add tag and then 5.7. and that's it. And you can also run brew services list to see all the services that are currently running in the background. So on my machine, it's only MySQL 5.7. Once you have installed MySQL, you can simply type in MySQL EU, which stands for the username. My is root. I recommend you to use the same. And then you could also set up a password in the beginning, but oftentimes you want to leave this empty, so you simply have to type in then MySQL u root and hit enter. And once you have done this, you will be inside the MySQL console, and inside here we can create a new database. So let's call this create database Laravel blog. Make sure to have the semicolon at the end, hit enter. You see query OK, one row affected. Now if I type in show databases, you see we have now Laravel blog. Alright, so use Laravel blog, exit. Okay, so Laravel has created the application, so cd blog with Laravel. How did I call it? cd blog app with Laravel. Alright, so inside here, 18 dots to open up the text editor, and Laravel follows basically the exact same pattern like Rails does. So we have MVC structure, so we have models, controllers, views, and also the migration part, and a lot of things that we can do with terminal follows a lot of Rails, of the ways Rails is doing things. However, I think Laravel is much more easier to understand for a beginner, especially when it comes to customization, because in Ruby on Rails a lot of things are configured for you in the background. However, once you want to customize things in Rails, you really have to, it takes a long time to understand how Rails works. With Laravel, it's pretty obvious, because we have to import a lot of things in order to be able to use things inside the application, and we also need to write down the functions, things like that. We will see how Laravel works in just a moment, and like I said, really easy to work with, I think. The first thing we need to do is go to the environment file, and inside here we have to connect Laravel with our database. So here we basically can set up, you know, the app name, we can set up Redis here, we can set up the mail account here. So we can set up Pusher for some live streaming. So here at DB, let's change the database to Laravel block. So you have to spell here the exact same name that you have defined inside your MySQL database. Otherwise this won't work. And of course without the semicolon. And my username is root, like I said in the beginning, and password empty. Okay. So once you have done this, the first thing we need to do, or before we actually create a new model and a table, let's type in PHP artisan serve. And if we go to localhost 8000, we get the standard template from Laravel with a link to documentation to Laracast, which is a great site to learn Laravel more in detail. A new site, Nova, which is an admin panel you can use, but it costs something, but don't worry, you don't have to use it. And there are also a lot of options that are free. Forge, which is basically a hosting platform you can use, and the link to GitHub. All right, let's shut down the server, and the first thing we want to do is to create a model. So PHP artisan make model, and let's call it block. And here at the end we can add an M tag, and what this M tag does, it creates a table for us inside database migrations. So here we have create blocks table, and so just like in Rails, we can now define our table, but in a much more straightforward way, I think. So instead of, you know, adding the data inside the terminal, we can type in table string and then title and then table text for the content. All right. So once we have done this, we can migrate the file, and of course inside app we have now also the model block PHP, which is currently empty. So inside here, let's type in PHP artisan migrate, and so this will migrate our complete data. And so if we go now to PHP artisan tinker, we are now able to get at least a response when we type in app block create with a semicolon. Okay, I get an error because it's empty. So let's type in all. As you can see, we get an empty array. That means we have some kind of data we can work with, but it's completely empty. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do is to add a navbar and add also, you know, all the pages that we need. So first thing is go to resources, I think, yeah, views, and let's create a new folder called blocks, and inside here let's create a new file called indexblade.php. Let's add an h1 tag. Hello, this is index.blade.php. And then inside views, let's create a new folder called layouts, and then a new file called appblade.php. And inside here we generate the HTML tags, and let's call this block with Laravel. And then inside here we need to add a yield content. So what yield content does, it renders everything that gets injected into yield. So if you're familiar with Rails, there's also a yield where, you know, all the files that we want to render are injected inside yield. And so to make this work, we have to go to the index file here. At the top, we have to type in extends layouts app. So we are using here the app file. So for example, if we put in a navbar inside the app file here, we can render it on every file if we extending the layouts app. And then we also have to add a section called content down here and section. So Let's exit the console or Tinker and then PHP artisan serve. But before we do that, we have of course set up the route. So first let's go to web.php, and inside here we can type in route name, and then let's call it blocks path, and then get, and then the URL, and then we want to access blocks controller at index. Now we don't have a blocks controller currently, so inside here PHP artisan make controller and then blocks, and if we add the R tag, we get all the all the CRUD operations already implemented. So if I press enter, and we get an error, so I misspelled this. PHP artisan make controller blocks controller and then R, right? And then here inside HTTP controllers, we have now the blocks controller. As you can see, all the methods were set up for us, which saves a lot of time. For this tutorial, we will do this on our own. So let's delete the file and let's create the controller without the R tag. Hit enter, and now you see we have an empty blocks controller. Okay, so inside here, let's create a function called index, and then return view blocks index. So this will go to the blocks folder here and then call the index file. So let's refresh our application, make sure the server is running, PHP artisan serve, there we go, refresh, and make sure to go to blocks. Hello, this is index blade PHP. Okay, so this is working. We are now able to view the index file. The next thing I want to do is to add a navbar. So let's go to Bootstrap documentation, and first off, let's include the CDN, get started, and let's copy this here and paste it inside AppBlade here at the top. Save that, and if we go to components, navbar, we're now able to copy here the example, and then we can simply paste it inside here under the body tag. So if I refresh now the application, you will see that we have now the navbar. So inside here, the navbar, let's delete the form and all the links so that we are only left with one link. There we go, and let's align the links to the left side or the right side, ML, MD I think. So if I refresh this, there we go. There's one more thing I would like to do, and that is to add a div container for all the files we want to render. So we have automatically the container included here. So we will have here some kind of spacing already. All right. The next thing we want to do is to add and create the function or the ability to create blog posts, right? So the first thing we need to do is go to web PHP route name create block path, and then get blocks create, and then we want to point to blocks controller create, and then inside blocks controller public function create, and then return view blocks create. And then here inside blocks we have to create a new file called create blade.php. Hello, this is blade.php. Actually it's create blade.php. So when we refresh now the application, we have an error inside the web PHP file. So I forgot to add here the get. There we go. And if I go now to create, we should get the create blade PHP file. Okay, so inside create blade PHP, let's remove this and let's add here a form. We don't need a class for the form, and make sure the method is set up to post, and inside index we want to point to store block path, and we also want to add the block block ID. Actually, we don't need to add the ID, I think. So let's just leave this empty and make sure to add here a route in the front. So route and wrap that up. So there we go. Right. The next thing we need to do is to add a CSRF token. Now we could type in CSRF token, or we can use Blade's render engine from Laravel and simply type in CSRF, which is really convenient, I think, and really great to use. The next thing is we want to add here a div form group, and inside here a label. Let's call it title, and then inside here an input. Make sure it's text, name, title, and then here, and let's see what we get now. So if we go back, refresh the page, I get one error, and that's because store block path is undefined. So let's create this path as well. So if you're asking or wondering why we need to create another path, so create block path gets to the block's create page. All right, so we get basically the form here. Once we click on submit, we need to go to another route where we store it. So name, store block path, and then very important to call here the post, and then let's go to block simply, and then here blocks controller, and then add store. So when we refresh our form, we should be able undefined constant store block path post, and it seems like I have to go to blocks controller and create here the method as well. Let's see, store, and just leave this empty. Let's see if this works. No. So form action route store block path. So seems like I have a typo somewhere there. Not quite sure why it is not working. Let's retype this here. Form, and then action again, route, and then store block path, and that should be it. That should normally do the job. So, and then of course add here the method of post. Again, refresh the application. Right, so now it's working. Like I said, maybe there was some kind of problems in the caching of Laravel, I don't know. So let's add another form group here, and label for content, and make sure the input has, by the way, a class called form control. Then also here let's add an input type text. Actually, for this let's add a text area, name content, and we don't need an ID, and also not calls. We can leave the rows here. However, let's add here a class of form control as well. So refresh our application, see what we get. And you see we don't get the, and you notice that we don't have any styles on our page. The reason for that is because we have to include or extend layouts app. So once we do this, we get now here the styles. And we also have to wrap this up into a section so that we have here the container array inside of it. So there we go, looks already much better. And the last thing we want to do is to add a button, and we can also wrap the button up in a form group. So form group and then button, and make sure the type is submit, and the class is btn outline primary. and let's call this add blog post. Doesn't really matter. Refresh, and there we go. All right, so the next thing is if we type in here something, we will get an error, and actually we just get an empty page. And the reason for that is currently we don't do anything with store. So when we hit submit, add blog post, it goes here to the function store, but it's currently completely empty. So here we add a request and a variable request, and then we want also access the ID of these of the block we are creating. So, or actually we don't need an ID because we create a new block. So let's remove the ID, and here block equals to new block. And to use and to be able to use block, we have to use app block here at the top. Once we have done this, we are now able to get the title, for example, and then assign the request title to it. Same goes for block content, assign request content. And then make sure to save it, so save. And then simply return redirect route blocks path. So we will be redirected to the index page. So let's refresh our application. Hello world whatsoever. Great. Awesome. Add blog post. And there we go. So let's go to PHP Artisan Tinker. And inside here, PHP Artisan Tinker. And inside here, app block first, and as you can see, we have a blog post with the ID of 1, title, content, create at timestamps. So this is working just fine. So let's go here to index blade, or before we do that, let's get here first. Let's create a new variable and call it blocks equals to block all. Okay, and inside the view here, we store the blocks variable like so. Blocks, and then inside index blade PHP we are now able to create a loop. So for each blocks as block, and then end for each, and then we can simply type in block title, for example, and we should be able to see the title, hello world. So there we go. And if I type in block content, we should be able to see the content. So this is working just fine. So let's wrap that up inside inside a cart or something like that. So here at the top, let's add a div row. Make sure we are using HTML. So there we go. And then let's add here div call md6, and we want to start the loop at the top, right? So for each blog post we want to have a call md6, and inside here a cart, and inside the cart header we want to add the block title. So let's paste that in, and if we refresh now the application, there we go. And so let's add here down under the card a card body, I think, and then we can add here the block content. So there we go. Now let's make the title link so that when we click on it we will get to the show page. So let's take this here, copy, paste it in, and the link is route, and then we have blocks, actually block path, and then we need to assign the block ID. So block ID. Now this will not work currently because we haven't set up the show path. So let's go to web PHP route name and then block path, get blocks and then D, And then we also want to point to the show page. And inside blocks controller, we need to create a new function called public function show. And here we accept an ID. And so let's create a new variable called block, and then block find ID. And then return view blocks show. And then we assign the ID here. So block points to the block variable. And so now inside blocks folder, we have to create a new file called show blade.php. And inside here, hello, this is the show page. So let's refresh our application, and you see we have now here a link, and if I click on that, we go to blocks one. Hello, this is show page. As always, make sure to add extends layouts app, and then wrap that up inside section content. And then down here, add an end section. So we will have the styles included. So there we go. Inside here, let's add a div called md, or actually first off a row, and I need to make sure I use HTML here. So div row, and then div call md 12, and then let's add here an h3 with the block title. There we go, and let's add a breaking here to have some kind of spacing there. All right, and then also let's add a pleat class with the block content. There you go. All right, so this is working. Now let's add here, down here, inside the row, a link to get back. So simply route and then blocks path. Let's confirm this is working. So back, and there we go. And let's add here inside the code also a link to edit our blog post. So edit, and let's point to route edit block path. Now again, we will get an error because we haven't set up the path when we go to the show page. So there we go. So let's go to web PHP, and inside here, route name edit block path, get blocks ID, and then we want to go to edit and simply point to blocks controller and edit. And inside blocks controller, we can now create a new function called public function edit, and we accept an ID, and I think we're fine with the ID alone. So here we simply want to find the block we want to edit. So block find the ID. There we are getting, and then return view blocks edit, and then add the block variable to it. So block, and then here again blocks new edit blade.php, and instead of creating this on our own again, simply copy it from the create file. Let's go to the edit page, paste it in, and instead of going to the store page, we will go to the update path. So for now, let's just leave this as it is. Let's make sure to edit this to edit blog post. And if we go now to edit, you see we get now the edit form, edit blog post. Okay, so this is different than the create post. However, we don't have any values inside here. So here we have to change the path to update block path, and then we also need to assign the variables. So block ID. Okay, and then inside here the input fields, we also have to add a value. Actually, before we do this, let's undo this here so that you can see why we are doing this. So value equals to block and then the title. Now if we refresh our application, you see I get now the title of the first blog post, and inside the text area we need to get the content. So then we will see the content. All right, so let's create here the path. So update block path, and then let's assign here the block ID. All right, and let's go to blocks controller, and inside here let's create a new function called update. And inside here we want to get the request. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to get the block. So we also need to add here the ID. So block equals to block find the ID. And once we have that, we can basically get the block title equals to the request title. And then block.content equals to request.content. And then we can run block.update instead of save, I think at least. So return view, actually return redirect route, and let's go back to the block path and add here the ID. So block, actually just block. So let's see if this is working. I get an error, the block path not defined. So let's see, inside web PHP edit block path. So of course we have to create now the route, update block path, and very important to add here the it's actually the put method, and then blocks, and then the ID, and then we also want to point to blocks controller update. I think we will still get one error because I forget one thing, but let's just try that out. Edit blog post, there we go, no message. And the reason for that is because we have to add inside edit blade PHP also the method we want to use. So inside HTML we can only use post, but we need to use the method put because we are doing here a CRUD operation. So we could type method field and then put, or we could use Blade's template engine and simply type in method and then put, and that's all we need to do. So when we go back here to edit and try to edit our blog post and click on edit blog post, this is working. However, I'm missing edit blog post the ID. And so inside show, we have to add here the ID. So simply type in block and then block ID. And now this should work. So if I click on edit, we go to the edit form, and you see Laravel has already stored the updated title. So let's add here some kind of numbers to make it more obvious. Edit blog post, and there we go. So let's add here to the href also a class btn outline info to have here a button, right? And let's add this. Let's add a class to the back button. So btn outline, I don't know, secondary, something like that. Refresh, there we go. And let's make sure we wrap that up inside our call MD12. So here we go. So when we click back, this is working. When we click edit, this is working as well. So there's one more thing left, and that is the ability to delete the blog post. So let's add here one more href, and this time route to delete blog path. And then also add here the ID, block ID. and then a class btn outline danger delete. Right? So of course, when we click on this, and actually when we just refresh page, we get the error that the delete path is not set up. So web PHP, and then route name delete block path, and here we need to get delete, and then blocks ID, and then blocks controller add delete. Now let's call it destroy. And then inside blocks controller, we can simply go here to under the update function, public function destroy, and here we need to get the ID. So first let's find the block by getting the ID here, and then we want simply delete the block, and then return redirect to the route of blocks path, so back to the index page. So this should normally work, so let's confirm this. If I click on delete, nothing happens, and this is because we have to wrap up the button inside form. So here form action, and then let's point to delete. Actually, we need to add here the route, and then delete block path, and then again add here block ID. There we go. And then inside the form, we can actually delete this here. Inside the form, add an CSRF token, very important. And then let's add the button class btn outline danger delete. And here we want to also add the type of submit. So we are doing basically the same like we did before. However, I forget to add the form. So whenever you want to delete something in Laravel, you have to use the form because it's an action that you are doing. So whenever you are using some kind of things like the action, you have to make sure to use a form, and make sure also to use here the method of post. We can only use post. So down here we have to define this. We could either write down method field delete, or again simply use the syntax from a blade and then type in method delete. So there we go, and this should now finally work. So if I click on delete, we get redirected to the index page, and it's now currently empty. And let's confirm this. First blog post is now nil. So we have implemented the full working CRUD application in just 40 minutes. All right, so we have implemented this. We can now create the blog posts. Actually, let's go back here to the app, blade PHP, and then let's change here the link. Let's make this home link route to blocks path, so we get to the index page. And then let's add another link, and I'm not quite sure why Atom is always using PHP instead of HTML. So link nav item, and then nav hrefs class to route create block path, and then create new blog post, something like that. So if we refresh now our application, make sure the server is running PHP artisan serve. We have now the ability, of course we have to add here the class, so class nav link. There we go. Create new blog post. Make sure to spell this correctly. Actually, we can call it create blog post. Alright, so if I click on this, we will go to the add blog post page, and of course we can create here a blog post. Click on add blog post, and there we go, and we can click here on the blog post and we will be directed to the show page, and we can edit it and delete it and even go back. Okay, let's create another one to see if the looping is working correctly. So alright, so we get here an error. That is because index blade PHP, we have to change the end tag here. Let's see, under the div call MD6. So there we go. Alright, and let's add here also maybe a p lead, and again HTML, and let's add here, for example, a block created add. So this will give us the timestamp, and we can use div for humans and make sure to add a posted right in front of the create method, and you can see we get here the posted 1 minute ago information. So again, div for humans will change the created timestamp to minutes ago function. So again, this is something that comes with Laravel, which is really time saving. And let's add here a breaking of, I don't know, maybe 3 to have some kind of spacing here. So there we go. So maybe here let's add also 3 breakings, or actually 2 are enough. There we go. And we could also, one more thing I would like to do is to add maybe here a button, and let's add a class of btn, btn outline primary view post, and then let's add a route. Actually, we could simply create an href, so sorry for that. So route, and then block path, and then inside here we need to assign the variable block ID, and then add here the class of btn outline primary, and then view post. So let's remove here the button, refresh the page, and there we go. So if I click on view post, we go directly to the blog post. Alright, so the last thing that I actually want to do as a little bonus, I would call it, is to add the ability to have, you know, the function that we can attach an image to each blog post and then display here the image. And if we click on the title, we should be able to see the blog post, the image as well. So the first thing we need to do is to go to our text editor and make sure to have our project opened up. And now inside database, so let's click on migration, and here at our blocks table we can add a new table. So this is very different from Race, where it's a little bit hacky to add new tables to your existing table. To add attributes to your existing tables. So in Laravel you can simply type string, and let's call this image. So later on we will store the URL image to the string and then access this. So to make this work, we have to rerun our migration. So PHP artisan migrate, and we could run refresh. So this would only change the files that have changed, and we would still have the posts and everything stored. Or we could run fresh, which means everything will be resetted, all the blog posts will be erased, and we will have a complete fresh database, which is what I want. Let's hit enter. Let's go back here and make sure the server is running, PHP artisan serve, And here logos 8000, you see we don't have any blog post anymore, so it's completely empty, but we have now the ability to store the image, or at least a string. So let's first change the create blade file where we are creating the blog post. So down here of the button, let's create a new class form group, and as always make sure to use HTML. And then here we want to have an input field. Instead of text we want to have a file, and then the name, let's call it files for now, and then let's add a class of form control. Okay, so if we go now to create blog post, we have now here the field to add images. So the next thing we need to do is to go to the blocks controller and adjust our store function here. So the first thing we need to do is to create a path. Okay, so we simply create a new variable, and let's actually put this under the new block variable. So path equals to we can actually use storage to do this. So make sure to add use storage here at the top to be able to use this. And then we can do something like that where we say storage put file, and then we can basically tell which kind of folder or where we want to store this. So let's call this public, and then we can get the request and get here the file, where file comes from request, so we can access files with file, and then the name of it, which was files. So very important that you use here the same typing that you have used inside name. So files. All right, so if you would have called your name here, you know, image for example, or images, you would have to type in here images as well. Make sure to add your semicolon, and now we are able to create a URL variable, and then simply here we want to get the URL from the path. So storage does this for us automatically in the background, and now we have stored the URL here, so we can go to block image. How do we call the table? Image. And then store the URL to the image string, so equals to URL, and we should be now able to store the pages. But before we can do this, we need to do one more thing. Notice that in public we don't have a public or resource folder. Now if we go to storage, you see we have inside the app the public folder. Now all the files will be uploaded here, at least when you have here the public tag. If we would have used here another name, for example images, the files will be stored down in a folder called images. So make sure it's called public for now, very important. So all the files will be stored inside public. However, we don't have access to public. So instead we have to link our public folder so that it is inside this public folder, because everything that's inside public folder is able to be accessible for the visitor user whatsoever. So in order to do this, we have to run php artisan storage link, I think. There we go. And now you see we have here a storage folder. So currently it's empty because the public folder is empty. So when we run our server php artisan surf and then refresh the application and then type in learn Ruby on Rails, great framework, and then here we blog post, we get one error, and there's that the put files path file hash name is nil. So images. All right, so there's actually one more thing I forgot totally. Let's go to block.php, and we have to define here the protected fill able. And inside here we have to add the title, the content, and now the image. So what this does is, it's basically, if you're familiar with Rails, it's a whitelist that tells Laravel what can be uploaded to the database. So in this case, a title, a content, image. So here, title, content, image. So normally this should almost work, I think. If I go here, create blog post, type in something, click on add blog post. Okay, we still get here the error that it's nil. So the path is public, which is fine, and then we have the request file and then the hash name files. Alright, so I think that is because we have to add the enc type multi-part form data. Let's see. I think that was the issue. So let's type in, let's add the blog post, and there we go. So always make sure to add here the enc type in order to be able to use the file. So when we go now to PHP artisan tinker and run app.blog first, you see we have now here the image string and there's a URL attached to it. So again, path equals to storage put file, so we are putting the file inside a public folder, and by the way we have now here the file. So there we go, and you see also inside the storage public folder we also have the file. So this puts the file inside public, and request file is whatever we are getting from here, okay? And then we create a new variable and call the storage URL function and inject here the path. So we are getting the URL back, and then we add it simply to our image string and store it. Okay, so now we are able to go to the index.php file, and inside here, right under the header, inside body, let's add here an image, and let's add here the path. So asset, and then we want to get the block image, okay, and then add here the class of card image top, and we should be able actually to see the image, and there we go. So this is working, and this number is our content. So let's make sure to add, I don't know, maybe, actually we don't need the content, we don't need to display the content in the card, so I think we're fine with that. Now we could also add a link to the route block path, and then add here the block ID, so block ID, and then wrap the image up inside the A tag. So we should now be able to click on that and go to the show file. All right, so that's working. As you can see, it works really easily inside Laravel. We have we didn't have to do too much here. We didn't have to do too much setup here. Actually, we just set up two variables, called the storage method, called the put file function, store it inside a public, get the request file, store it inside a URL variable, and add it simply to the block model. And then we simply, get the link from the asset, and then we access it via the image. So this is why this is working, and again, it's really fast. and wasn't really too much. And again, we have here the form, so we can upload the images. Now, we could go to the showblade PHP file and add here, I don't know, maybe here at the top, under the breaking, the image source, and then again, assets, and then the block image, then class image card top. Need to change the class card image top. And then we have also the title, so let's add here a breaking of 2 maybe, so we have some kind of spacing there. HTML, there we go, kind of spacing, and let's add maybe here a breaking line as well. There we go, and I mean, we're fine with that. So okay, so we have now the ability to see title, the content, have here our buttons to delete the different blog posts, edit it, delete it, can go back to the main page. We are now able to add images as well to our blog post. And we also have the ability now to render the images, click on them, and when we are on the show page, we have also the ability to display them. So we have accomplished really a lot in a really short amount of time, I think. I rushed it a little bit here and there, but all in all, considering that we had to set up the CRUD completely on our own, so we didn't use the tag here, for example, in the beginning. I showed you that we could also use PHP artisan, make controller, the name of controller, and then add the R tag to get the resources. And then we would have here, and instead we would have here inside the blocks controller, the functions already set up for us. But instead we didn't use the R tag, and so we had to create the public functions on our own, which is always a good way of learning a new framework or learning web development in general. Once you have the idea down how things work, you can always use tags like these that sets things up for you. And again, like I said in the beginning, I think Laravel is really good for beginners. It's really easy to understand, I think, much easier to some degree than Rails, I would say, and it's comes with a lot of functionality, so I plan of doing more of these kind of tutorials. I think in the future somewhere with React as well, where we connect the Laravel application with React or with Vue or even Angular. And I also plan on doing, some kind of basic applications that we can do with Laravel. So let me know what you think about Laravel, if you enjoy working with it, if you enjoyed this tutorial, and especially if you find it easier to understand than arrays. For me personally, like I said, I have a C# background, and I know a lot of people would say Ruby is easier to understand because it doesn't have any syntax. It was written and created to be easy to read. But if you have a C# background like myself, at least, I think PHP is sometimes even easier to follow and easier to see because of all the syntaxes. But again, that's just my opinion. And like I said, it has already a lot of things implemented, and basically it has everything implemented you need to get started and to create web applications. It's like full battery included, I would say. So again, they also have Stripe included, and like I said, without any CLI, we just created more or less the complete application in less than 1 hour, I think, which is pretty fast considering that we had to do everything on our own. Again, I rushed the tutorial a little bit to, get to the point, but all in all, I myself think it's really nice to work with Laravel, so I will definitely do more of these kind of tutorials. And again, if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, let me know in the comment sections. If you want to see more Rails tutorials, if you want to see more Laravel tutorials, or if you have some kind of frameworks that you want to get covered or want to learn more about, let me know in the comment sections. And so, as always, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thanks for watching, and see you maybe next time. Bye.